The ISIS Papers, Chapter 3, Unified Field Theory Psychiatry, 1980. Yet do I marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing. County Cullen. Is it conceivable that a black who is also a woman can critique and dismantle the whole of Western psychiatry? I will begin this essay somewhat differently than it was originally conceived several years ago. This alteration is occasioned by having read the article, Retreat Behind New Walls Seen Posing Danger for Psychiatry, which appeared in the June 1980 issue of Clinical Psychiatry News. It is a report from San Francisco on the address given by Dr. Alan M. Stone as outgoing president at the annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Stone stated, "The new walls are being built as psychiatrists attempt to deal with the issues of racism, homosexuality, and the situation of women. These are all issues which have confronted us in our practice, challenged the moral assumptions that lie concealed in our theories, and confounded us with disputes and acrimony in our association. It is no accident that each issue invites psychiatry to take a stand on human values. Human values, after all, are a crucial link in the chain that binds the self to society. To take a stand on them reveals something about our own selves, our own relations to society, and our own vision of what it means to love and to work. Many psychiatrists believe that the APA should limit itself to issues that are clearly psychiatric, but many others believe that these social issues are clearly psychiatric. I shall claim that what separates these two groups can only be understood as part of the deep theoretical dilemma in which American psychiatry finds itself: its lack of conceptual clarity. This theoretical ambiguity is the core of the conflict that confronts psychiatry. As pragmatic eclectics, uncertain that we have put the pieces of the picture together correctly, we can never be confident that we can distinguish between the sick patient and the sick society. Psychiatry's contribution to what it means to be a person is its most powerful aspect. That contribution cannot be under psychiatry's control in a free society. However, the profession has a responsibility for the hidden values in its theories and therapies, which contribute to the shaping of contemporary consciousness. It is in the issues surrounding the subject of women that perhaps the most convincing attack on the hidden values in psychiatry has been made. Dr. Stone continued this discussion, asking if these issues cut deeper into American psychiatry than racism and homosexuality. As far as I can see, the case against psychiatry as it regards women is far more damaging, requires far more than a minor adjustment of our composite sketch. Indeed, it compels each of us to re-examine not only our theories, but also our lives and relationships. There can be no new psychology of women that does not require a new psychology of men. That makes necessary a new conception of all our human values and all the paradigms of psychiatry. Psychiatry does not stand outside of history or morality, but how do psychiatrists decide which history and which morality to accept? The rules about which history and which morality to accept are not clearly described in the biologic, psychodynamic, and behavioral paradigms. What is required of us is moral ambition. Until our composite sketch becomes a true portrait of humanity, we must live with our uncertainty. We will grope, we will struggle, and our compassion may be our only guide and comfort. Originally, my essay began with the statement, "It is clear to many that grave problems are confronting the field of psychiatry at theoretical and conceptual levels. This crisis has important implications for treatment, as well as problems encountered in formulating diagnostic categories, as evidenced in the controversies surrounding the task of developing Diagnostic and Statistical Manual No. 3. But who better should state the problems facing psychiatry in America than an outgoing president of the American Psychiatric Association. Indeed, who would be more readily believed than he? While not accepting all that was said by Dr. Stone, most specifically his view of sexism as more problematic issue than racism, I do share his awareness of a floundering chaos in psychiatry's current theoretical and conceptual state. It was this very awareness that led me to the consideration of a unified field theory in psychiatry. The concept of a unified field theory is derived from the work of the great physicist Albert Einstein, March 14, 1879, April 18, 1955. Einstein, a mathematical physicist, the most recognized and highly renowned scientist in the history of Western civilization, spent the greater portion of his productive years in search of a unified field theory, a theory that, in mathematical terms, by a single set of equations, would combine all of the different manifestations of energy phenomena in the universe. Einstein studied the force of gravity and produced the general theory of relativity. He studied the forces of electromagnetism and produced the special theory of relativity, which became a more accurate yardstick for measuring the characteristics of the physical world. Then Einstein questioned the possibility of generalizing the mathematical foundations of the theory to derive not only the properties of the gravitational field, but also those of the electromagnetic field. His work is reviewed in Ronald Clark's 1971, Einstein, The Life and Times. In Einstein's own words, "For years, it has been my greatest ambition to resolve the duality of natural laws into unity. This duality lies in the fact that physicists have hitherto been compelled to postulate two sets of laws, those which control gravitation and those which control the phenomena of electricity and magnetism. Many physicists have suspected that two sets of laws must be based upon one general law, but neither experiment nor theory has until now succeeded in formulating this law. The relativity theory reduced to one formula all laws which govern space, time, and gravitation, and thus it corresponded to the demand for simplification of our physical concepts. The purpose of my work is to further this simplification, and particularly to reduce to one formula the explanation of the field of gravity and the field of electromagnetism. For this reason, I call it a contribution to a unified field theory. Now, but only now, we know that the force which moves electrons in their ellipse about the nuclei of atoms is the same force which moves our Earth in its annual course about the sun, and is the same force which brings us the rays of light and heat which make life possible on this planet." Not only did Einstein die before achieving this goal, but prior to his death, his conceptualization of a unified field theory was being dismissed by younger physicists as the ideas of an old man whose scientific usefulness had passed long ago. Quantum physics and the physics of chance and statistical probabilities, the physics of Born and Heisenberg, were supplanting the Einsteinian physics of the whole. This was the new physics of interdeterminacy. This new physics could be characterized by Sir George Thomson's following statements, which appear in Einstein, The Life and Times. "Wherever a system is really complicated, as in the brain or in an organized community, indeterminacy comes in, not necessarily because of h, Planck's constant, but because to make a prediction, so many things must be known that the stray consequences of studying them will disturb the status quo, which can never therefore be discovered. History is not and cannot be determinate. The supposed causes only may produce the consequences we expect." I am almost certain that most workers in the field of psychiatry are not consciously aware that they too have assured a position in the respective scientific camps of either Albert Einstein or that of Bohm and Heisenberg. The camp of indeterminacy holds, as articulated by Sir George Thompson, that in a system as complicated as the brain or in an organized community, one cannot uncover a unitary law or a unitary cause of the many complex forms of behavior, knowledge of which would enable prediction of expected consequences. On the contrary, the camp of determinacy concludes that in any finite energy system, no matter how seemingly complex at the surface level, a unitary law can be discerned simply because there is specific order in the universe, and thus there is order in any given energy system. A unitary law would reveal the nature of that specific order. I reside in the Einstein camp, the camp of determinacy. Einstein's effort towards uncovering the unified field has great meaning to me as a psychiatrist, behavioral scientist, because it is my developing conviction that the present confusion is largely a result of our failure to see the interconnections that exist between many seemingly isolated, disconnected behavior energy phenomena in Western culture. Actually, there are very few, if any, workers in behavioral science who perceive the necessity to search out, on the one hand, these interconnections, and on the other hand, to unveil the total unified form that is structured by these interconnections and their fundamental cause. This may be said in the reverse order, because there is the failure on the most part of investigators to perceive the total outline of the Western cultural dynamic. It is difficult, if not impossible, for them to make sense of the isolated behavioral patterns within the total behavioral system framework. Behavioral scientists, thus frustrated, have tried to find the answers in statistics, neurochemical molecules, and genes. It was this same limitation and dependence on the statistical method of analyzing energy phenomena that depressed Einstein in the work of his colleagues in physics. He lamented that they just could not see the larger picture. They lacked his intuitive faculty to see at a deeper and more encompassing level. This may be best understood if we look at the scattered pieces of a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle for which the outlining border has not yet been set in place. Generally speaking, one cannot make heads or tails of the scattered tiny pieces. Once the outline or context has been established, the order in which the small pieces are to be placed immediately becomes clear. I use this particular introduction for this brief essay because a total behavior energy system also can be seen and understood as a unified field of energy phenomena. Once that unified field of behavior energy is perceived and described, setting forth its etiology and dynamic, the once seemingly isolated, little understood, often unexamined individual phenomena of behavior energy within the field are seen in brilliant coherence, whereas before they were neither visualized nor understood adequately. A parallel process can be seen in the recent discoveries in physics of strange celestial objects, such as quasars, pulsars, and black holes, the discovery of which can be seen as dependent upon Einstein's concept of a unified field, the framework of his relativity concept. The global white supremacy system, racism, is a highly specific system of behavior energy. The force and energy of this system, through its ultimate goal, objective, and its patterns of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, perception, and symbols in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, determines the dominant patterns of behavior in the world today. The global system of white supremacy is euphemistically referred to as Western civilization. In Chapter 1, I explained that the global behavior patterns of racism are a survival necessity for the white collective. This racist activity is a compensatory attempt to prevent white genetic annihilation on a planet where the vast majority of peoples are genetically dominant to the melanin deficient whites. The awareness of self in the white global collective as a white genetic mutant population that was rejected by their black parents in Africa, see Chapter 2, and the subsequent conscious and or unconscious determination to survive as a global minority became the underlying law that determined the evolution of the now global white supremacy system or culture. All major and minor behavior energy crystallizations or behavior units in the global white collective, no matter how simple or complex, old or new, short or long-lived, must conform in the final analysis to the basic behavior energy equation of white over non-white, or white power over non-white powerlessness. This is the necessary power or energy equation for white genetic survival. This behavior energy equation is expressed in energy manifestations of pattern of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception in all areas of people activity. From this basic law, it becomes possible to predict the ultimate output of individual and collective white brain computers at the local and global levels. In energy terms, this means that it is possible to predict the fundamental patterns, the bottom line, of all energy that flows from the white collective in its dynamic interactions with the non-white collective. That sum total of behavior energy expression is always the energy crystallization of white supremacy, white genetic survival, irrespective of the gross or subtle myriad behavior forms it assumes. Also, this energy formation can be understood as a finite unified energy field or force field, albeit that the force is behavior energy. This new theory of psychiatry is what I refer to as unified field theory psychiatry. It is a psychiatry that perceives a definable whole, global system of behavior energy, wherein the behavior events lend themselves to prediction because the ultimate objective of the system remains constant. The basic considerations that Einstein proposed for physical energy in his concept of a unified field theory can be applied readily to behavior energy in the concept of unified field theory psychiatry. Thus, the role of all major and minor patterns of behavior within the field can be understood and even predicted. Now, the underlying interrelationships between seemingly unconnected patterns of behavior are visible. It is as though the end of a knotted ball or yarn has been discovered that with patience permits complete unraveling without breaks in the yarn. Heretofore, no Western behavioral scientist has recognized the single connecting thread of logic permeating seemingly unrelated phenomena such as lynchings, smoking objects, bullfights, chocolate candy with nuts, coffee, guns, umbrellas, automobiles, skiing, races and racing, horse, foot, and car, the Adam and Eve mythology, Moby Dick, Dracula, Frankenstein, the play Eckes by Peter Schaeffer, paper money, gold, Christian religious symbolism, the Nazi swastika, anti-Semitism, sexual perversions, apartheid, child abuse, capitalism, nudism, the Holocaust, alienation, sexism, homosexuality, pornography, narcissism, gambling, rape, flags, men's ties, etc. All of the above are but a few of the major behavior energy entities, myths, and symbols included in the white supremacy system culture that are related to the single underlying law governing the origin and the continued existence of Western civilization. Western social and behavioral science, particularly psychiatry, has been content with behavior fragment analysis and multiple theoretical explanations for different behaviors. This demonstrates a failure to comprehend the entire forest while focusing on isolated trees or clumps of trees. Failure to comprehend the whole behavior energy force field has resulted in isolated behavior modification techniques and programs. the inability to grasp the manner in which the total social structure determines the behavior of the individual personality, and the tendency to focus on isolated neurochemical sequences and mechanisms as causing certain behavior pattern constellations. This limited pattern of perception and the apparently necessary pattern of endless abstracting, with an inability to synthesize the whole, may be predicated upon a pattern of data reception in the nervous system of persons who possess insufficient levels of melanin in their nervous systems. The lack of melanin results from the genetic deficiency state of albinism or its variants, which in turn influences basic patterns of perceptions of energy messages from the physical social environment. I will examine this possibility in a future work. Understanding this, it is clear that current Western psychiatry's inability to identify the interrelationships existing between racism, homosexuality, and sexism, articulated by Dr. Alan Stone, is due to an inadequate conceptual and theoretical base. As stated previously, racism is the evolved behavior energy system predicated upon the need for white genetic survival. Both homosexuality and sexism are derivatives of that fundamental dynamic, the forces in the white supremacy system that lead to a massive increase of passivity, effeminization, bisexuality, and homosexuality in the black male population as necessities for white genetic survival are discussed in Chapter 6. However, to specifically focus on white male homosexuality in the white supremacy system culture, we must return to the male albino mutant's awareness of himself in contrast to the prototypic human male, the black male, the father of the early albino mutants. Indeed, this fact is the true basis for the Oedipus mythology. Historically, white males worldwide have suffered the deep sense of male inferiority and inadequacy because they represent a mutant genetically recessive minority population that can be genetically annihilated by all non-white peoples, males and females. Ultimately, this awareness in the white collective has produced high levels of masculine self-doubt, fear, anxiety, and self-alienation. These difficulties have been intensified by the awareness that white reproductivity is far lower than the natural reproductivity of any non-white population. Thus, the white male collective feels vulnerable to the global non-white male collective, but most specifically to the black male collective because of blacks' ability to produce the highest levels of melanin and thereby the greatest potential for white genetic annihilation. This basic logic of disgust with the white genetic and genital self drives the brain computer in the white male collective to self-negating patterns of behavior. Also, it is the basis for the continuing question in the white collective: who has the largest penis, the black or the white male? At another level, white male homosexuality may be viewed as the symbolic attempt to incorporate into the white male body more male substance by either sucking the penis of another male and orally ingesting the semen, or by having male ejaculate deposited in the other end of the alimentary canal. Through anal intercourse, the self-debasing white male may fantasize that he can produce a product of color, albeit that the product of color is fecal matter. This fantasy is significant for white males because the males who are able to produce skin color are viewed as the real men. This same sense of maleness deficiency in the white supremacy culture causes the behavior patterns of smoking, either small white phallic symbols called cigarettes, large dark brown or black phallic symbols known as cigars, pipes, and the long brown cigarettes called Moors, or does it mean Moors? These are sucked, swallowed, puffed, and otherwise bodily ingested, ultimately leading to self-negation through potential cancer-caused deaths. Also, it should be noted that for the white male collective, the greatest sense of male power comes from the smoking of the large dark brown phallic smoking objects, cigars and pipes. Thus cigars are given at the birth of a son. See chapter 11. Similarly, this sense of maleness deficiency elevates the gun to such important status in the white supremacy culture. See chapter 8. White male homosexuality is reinforced in the white family, wherein the white male's sense of genetic inadequacy causes him to project his sense of genetic inferiority onto the white female. She is forced to accept the concept of her own genetic inferiority compared to white males. In angry reaction to the white male attack, she causes her white sons to negate their masculinity and to become more like herself as a female. Also, the white male must oppress the white female because the latter proclaims that her ideal sex partner is, quote unquote, tall, dark, and handsome. Should the white female be permitted to have her freedom and to sexually aggress against the dark man, the non-white male, white genetic annihilation will occur. The two above factors, 1. White males projecting their sense of genetic inferiority onto white females, and 2. White males fear that white females, in their preference for black and other non-white males, will become participant in white genetic annihilation, have resulted in what Western culture now refers to as sexism, the repression of white females by white males in the white supremacy system or culture. Presently, white females are responding collectively to white males' imposed sense of genetic inferiority through their struggle for quote-unquote equality with white males. Large numbers of white females are proclaiming themselves lesbians, believing that this is a constructive response to their sense of inadequacy. They, of course, fail to realize that these behaviors arise from the fact that they have been taught to degrade their genetic makeup as white females in the subtle dynamics of white family life. Thus, they move into behaviors of non-self reproduction and self-negation. Also, in white females' drive to be equal to white males, they have increased greatly the practice of sucking on the white phallic symbols, cigarettes, causing a sharp increase in their incidence of self-negation through lung cancer. White females fail to understand that while they strive to become the same as white males, they become more alienated from their genetic selves. Thus, they fall victim to the dynamic of genetic alienation, the central core of racism, as they participate in the finite, unified energy field of white genetic survival. Whether one examines the microcosm of the individual white personality or the macrocosm of the global white collective, the law of white genetic survival stands. That law can be stated in the following equation: white power over non-white powerlessness, or W divided by NW. Nonetheless, the implication of the law for whites is a failure of individual and collective white self-respect, based upon the negative image and concept of self. In the white collective, there is self-esteem, which is a compensatory inflated sense of the self, but there is not fundamental respect for the genetic white self. The implications for psychiatry are as follows. On the basis of a negative image and concept of the self, the brain-computer evolves patterns of neurochemistry, logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception that are self- and group-negating and productive of disharmony in the universe. These are patterns of neurochemistry and behavior consistent with various degrees of mental illness. On the basis of a positive self-image and self-concept, the brain-computer evolves patterns of neurochemistry, logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception that are self- and group-supporting and productive of harmony in the universe. These are patterns of neurochemistry and behavior consistent with mental health. The following diagram shows the environmental factors that act upon the genetic and constitutional base to form the self-image and self-concept. Factors that support the self lead to positive self-images and self-concepts, whereas factors that deny the self lead to negative self-images and self-concepts. The task of psychiatry is to help the individual and the collective achieve genuine genetic self-respect, and thereby respect for others and for all aspects of the universe. Psychiatry's further task is to demonstrate that the white supremacy system, Western civilization, is unable to produce an environment in which mental health can evolve and flourish. Therefore, that power system needs to be abandoned for a more productive one. This unified field theory psychiatry concept of mental health and mental illness challenges the dictum of Sigmund Freud that mental health is the ability to work and to love. The global white supremacy system or culture constitutes a finite unified behavioral energy field. The single unitary law of white genetic survival governs its origin and its continuance. Homosexuality and sexism are necessary derivatives of this energy field and, just like all other significant behaviors in the global and local white collective, can be understood as derivatives of this finite unified behavior energy field. It is knowledge of the unitary causative law that governs this field and enables the prediction of future behavior energy patterns within it. The above discussion then serves as background to the essays which follows. All dominant behaviors in the white supremacy system culture are derivatives of this central concern and its secondary and tertiary elaborations and compensations, which also are concerned with white genetic survival. Together, these behavior patterns produce the white supremacy unified behavior field. Albert Einstein realized that we needed a law to guide us in and around the phenomena in the organized energy system of the physical universe, so that our movements and interactions in that universe could be facilitated. Similarly, we need a law to guide us in the evolved energy system of white supremacy behavior organization in order to facilitate our movement in that system, with the ultimate goal being truth, justice, harmony, and peace. Contrary to the fears of Dr. Alan Stone, new walls are being built in psychiatry. The old walls of artificial abstractions are being torn down, and in their place stands a new edifice, a unified field which can be used to diagnose, treat, and cure. End of Chapter 3. Read by Exam Info. Please support the channel by clicking on the links below and consider becoming a Patreon subscriber or purchasing the book or making a donation to this channel. Thank you for listening and thank you for your support.